And then we need the two columns set up. One is M and one is N. The return line number is post because the invocation happens on line 15 and there are no additional lines after line 15. M is easy because the expression 5 is used to specify the by-value parameter M, so M starts with a value of 5. N, on the other hand, is passed by reference, which means whatever column W has will become, N becomes an alias or a reference to that same column. And that's why N should be an alias of column B. Are we okay at this point with how I set up column C, D, and E? Okay. Yes?
Column M is a physical reference, where column N or E is a piece of paper reference.
Yes. Yeah, D is basically a variable. Remember,
Right.
a by-val parameter is a local variable. The only difference is the initial value is specified by the invoke statement, whereas a local variable has an unknown initial value. But E, or N in this case, which is passed by reference, is not really a variable on its own. All it is
referring back to the variable
exactly.
W.
It's only referring to some other column. And the way I make it work now is it refers to the column number and not the name of that column. Because the name of the column can be confusing, whereas the column number or the column name is unique. Okay? Now we go into the subroutine, starting with, let's see, this is relay. So we start execution on line 9. Line 9 invokes double, okay, which means we have to reserve another column for the return line number. In this case, it's easy. The invoke is on line 9. The next line is line 10. It has one single parameter called x. Because x is passed by reference, we have to pass whatever m is to x. When you look up m, m has its own storage, which means x becomes an alias of wherever column, whatever m is, which is in this case column D. Are we doing okay so far with the columns? Okay. Once we set up column F and column G, we can now continue execution inside double. There's only one thing to do, which is line 3. Line 3 is going to double the value of x and then put it back into x. We look up x, x is passed by reference, so we are really using column D. Column D has a value of 5, we multiply that by 2, it becomes 10. We store it back into x. But remember, when you have a pass by reference parameter, you don't change that column. You don't change the column of the parameter, you change the column that the parameter refers to. In this case, it is referring to column D, and as a result, column D is updated to a value of 10. Are we okay at this point? Okay. So do not put a 10 here. That's not what it's supposed to do. You have to put a 10 in column D. After line 3 is line 4, the end of the subroutine. So let me just compactify these two first. On line 4, all we do is to deallocate everything that we allocated. Oh, I cannot do that because... Why can't I do it? I cannot merge the two columns. Oh, well. So now they're deallocated, and we have to go back to line 10 because that's what return line number is telling me, is to go back to line 10. So we're back to line 10, we are here. N gets n plus m. N is a alias of column B. Column B has a value of 10 at this point. 10 plus 10 is 20. We store 20 back into n, and n is just an alias of column B. So column B is the one that is updated to a value of 20. Are we doing okay so far with this? Okay. And then we move on to line 11. Line 11 is invoking double again, which means we have to set up a return line number. This time we are returning to line 12. Parameter x is now n, but because n is also passed by reference to me, this time I do not say aka of column, Okay, this is bad. Should be just AKA column D, right? But this is bad grammar. So in this case, it is AKA column what? Should I make it AKA column E, or should I make it AKA column B? B. Okay, B is the proper answer because we just passed the alias along instead of making it an alias of an alias. Is that okay? Okay. And once we set up the columns, we can go into the subroutine. It only has one line that does anything useful, which is line 3. X gets X times 2. What is X? X refers to B. What is B? B has a value of 20. Effectively, we're doubling the value of 20 to 40 and then store it back into column B because X refers to column B. When we are done on line 4, we deallocate these two columns. So they're gone. We continue execution on line 12. And line 12 is the end of the subroutine. So this time we have to deallocate column C, D, and E. And the return line number tells me to continue on post, which means we are done with the trace. That's the entire trace for the homework assignment that was due about 35 minutes ago. That was it. It was not a long trace. It just has a lot of concepts that we have recently talked about. Yep.
What if you also entered the value of W?
That's fine. That's not a problem. As long as it is on column B, it's okay. As long as it's not, where the alias is. Okay. Yep. Any other questions about this trace? No questions? Okay. Let me save it first. I also want to put a link into Moodle at this point because I have been spending the past weekend, the weekend and also yesterday to retype my notes on subroutines to make it more consistent with the way I use a spreadsheet to trace subroutines. So that's why it is a little bit different now, and I have an update of my notes for that purpose. This sort of stuff takes a long time. Let me put the link first. Well, before I put the link, I have to remember where I put it, don't I? This is module 232. Just copy the link to here. It is still work in progress, and that's why I kind of hesitated to put a link here. Okay, but once I put a link here, we can just take a look at this note here. It's basically the same thing, how to trace a subroutine. It talks about the same stuff, how to invoke a subroutine and how to return from a subroutine, how to use local variables, how to use by value parameters, and how to use by reference parameters. The difference is how it is explained. The current modules, or the modules prior to this, does not use the column number when I pass by reference, and now it does. Okay, because if you look at the explanation of the trace, now I kind of simulate the effect of a spreadsheet. I have A, B, C, D, E as columns, and 1, 2, 3, 4 as row numbers. So this way it resembles a spreadsheet more than the notes that you have been reading until now. In other words, I'm remaking the notes to make it consistent with the current way that I teach this class. So anyone who has questions about the discrepancy between the way it is described in the modules and the way I teach it in the class, now it is now consistent. And I also, I put the explanation right next to the row of that particular construct, and hopefully this will help to explain, okay, what exactly is AKA column C? So that's an explanation of what that means. It also explains on this row here, when we store something into X, how come column E is not updated, and instead, in this case, column C is updated. So there's an explanation right next to it. So I'm hoping that some of you will find this more helpful. Okay, if you guys think that it can even be more clear, just let me know, and I can try to integrate additional material into the notes. Any questions at this point? It doesn't look like something that should take a weekend, right? How long do you think it should take? A few hours? Give it at the most 2 hours. Let me show you what it looks like. When I actually type the notes, it's not a WYSIWYG environment. So I just kind of, this part is obviously out of the scope of this class, but I just want to show you how it is done. Okay, this is the folder that contains all the files that I need, and I can open it read-only. This is the source of the class notes. This is how it is written. This is how I write the notes that you see in HTML and also in the PDF format. The table that you see, or the code that you see, is the purple stuff here, and the table that you see is this stuff here. And that's why it takes a little bit of time to do it, because it is not WYSIWYG. But the nice part of doing it this way is this. Okay? If you go all the way back and look at the PDF, oh, I used the wrong application. It's still okay. This is also an interesting application. It's called Zerno. It allows you to open up a PDF file and mark it up. In other words, you can mark up a PDF file and save the markup, not to overwrite the PDF, but save it in parallel to the PDF itself. So that's really great for taking notes in a class. If you have the material as a PDF file, now you can mark it up just like you mark up a piece of paper. But what I want to show you is this part here. You have just seen the HTML format. This is the printed format in PDF. They're consistent. Okay, they have exactly the same content and they're consistent. And that's why it takes me a little bit of time, because I want to make both the HTML version and the PDF version at the same time. So let's go ahead and close this. No. Yeah, we are in this class. Are there any questions at this point about returning values? No questions?
Yep. Last week Thursday, we did do a trace with the return values, and that's the way we do the traces for return values.
Yeah. So next homework assignment will be based on return values, or the mechanism of returning values. Okay. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to have more sample programs. Can you guys see how snappy it is now compared to like last week when I have the faulty compact flash card? This is like super fast. Okay, let's go ahead and write additional programs. And this time I'll use a define sub clone. Okay. Pass by value x, and all it does is to return whatever it is passed. In other words, if you look at this program, it's not going to be a very useful program, other than for the illustration of how to return values. Okay. I will define another subroutine called add. Okay. Passing by value x, passing by value y, and all it does is to return x plus y. And define sub. Once again, not a very particularly useful subroutine.